Good evening, everybody, and welcome to episode 16 of Camology, the Cambridge podcast. And tonight, this evening, I'm being joined by Martin Lyons. Hi, Martin.
Good evening.
How you doing?
Really well, thank you.
It's almost like we've met before this evening, isn't it? Good stuff, good stuff. Martin, so do you just want to give us a bit of background on yourself, what you do, and talk about your work as chairman of the NFFN, which is the Nature Friendly Farming Network? So over to you, Martin.
Thank you. Yeah. So I'm a third generation arable farmer, just outside St Neots, Cambridgeshire. My grandparents came here in 1936. We grow combinable crops, so wheat, barley, oilseed, rape and beans, and a little bit of millet. For many years, my grandfather and father was encouraged to increase productivity on the landscape and were paid to take hedgerows out. When I came back into the business after university, it was something that was missing. So for the past 20 years, I've been trying to deliver a more joined up approach by putting habitat back. We put lots of the hedgerows back. We take land out of production and deliver birdseed mixes like the picture behind me. So we have a winter resource of bird food. We do supplementary feeding in the winter, about 250 kilos a week. So like people do in their gardens, we do it on a large scale. And it's about joining it all up of how we get wildlife back on farms and understand how we manage it.
So Martin, can I stop you there? So you were just saying earlier about so when you came back from university, and when you said something was missing, was that sort of like, if you like, a personal epiphany where you were like, bloody hell, there's no wildlife on here, and we are, there's no life on the farm? Or did that come from sort of your education at university?
Education at university was about production agriculture and about getting more yield. When I come back on the farm, and I grew up here, compared with what I knew when I was really young to sort of the age when I got involved in the business, I knew my father used to talk about the English partridge we had in all the fields, the sparrows that the yard used to be full of. And when I was young, I was encouraged to shoot the little things because there were so many of them, they were a pain in the backside. Yeah. But food standards improved, sheds got closed down, habitat was removed, and it was just suddenly, it's not quite right. And then there's some government schemes to assist farmers in putting back what they took out 10 years before. And we got involved in it. And the more I start to understand it, the more I'm keen to deliver more and more. So we actually have a tapestry of habitats across, so we're 165 hectares at home on the farm. We also contract farm and rent to take the overall farming operation just over 500 hectares. And across all that land, we're delivering habitat resource and taking out unproductive areas of the field where we have pylons run across the field. We can leave a margin, delivering skylark plots, lapwing plots, areas for turtle doves, pollinators, protecting watercourses. And we can join it up, and it's making my business more productive by taking those unproductive areas of ground out and delivering habitat. And the more I've got involved in it, the more I start to understand the stuff I wasn't taught at university, how nature helps my farm. I need pollinators, I need soil health, I need all those beneficials. So we've adapted the business some more. We no longer do any cultivations on most of the farm. We use zero till and cover crops. So after I've harvested my crop, we plant another multi-species mix to capture carbon, put more organic matter in the soil, use their roots to tillage the soil, and then drill straight into that. So we've adapted and understanding nature more. And for the last 20 years, I've been involved in that. And for the last 10 years, we've had so many of like the conservationists moaning at farmers, the farming groups moaning at conservationists. But I thought, actually, this is a bit bonkers because we're not going anywhere. It's us and them. So I went to many meetings, and many other farmers I met had the same mindset across the country, that actually we do something in the middle. It's not just about the food we produce, it's how we manage the landscape in our farm and our assets.
Yeah.
So we got talking, and where's our voice? We needed a voice. So just over 4 or 5 years ago, I spoke to some organisations, and they sponsored a survey across farmers across the UK of what do you want? How do you feel your voice should be heard? And a lot of the conclusions that came back that there should be a group of farmers championing this way of farming where we balance our environmental stuff, our food production, and public access and all the other goods and services we can do.
Yeah.
So just over 3 years ago, I started work with one or two others to see if we can set a group of farmers up. And that spawned into the Nature Friendly Farming Network, which we launched 2.5 years ago. And that's to bring farmers together across the UK to talk about how they do things, what they're learning, what the problems have been, but champion that to other farmers, to politicians and policymakers, and to general public. So we made the organisation free to join for farmers and public, because it's the public that pay me to do a lot of the habitat management. And currently under the system of basic payments under the CA, the Common Agricultural Policy, we're paid within 10 centimetres of the edge of the field. So the mindset is to crop to the very edge because that's where the payment is. And actually we need a more balanced approach of how we help farmers manage the landscape. So yes, we set this up, and then we have an England group, Wales, Northern Ireland, Scotland, recognising the different governments. And it evolved that I ended up being the UK chair and driving this forward with working with many organisations, getting funding support from many organisations and trusts. And yeah, it's just been great. And we need a different direction. We hear that species decline, climate challenges. There is a different way. And actually, the more we understand nature and our farms, and it's not just about being organic, we welcome organic, it's about how we balance the two off. And that's sort of my journey of getting into farming, what I try and do, and then the network, and happy to expand more.
So going back a couple of steps, so I'm really interested. So you say you're balancing, you've got to balance wildlife and your yield. It'd be really interesting to know that farms that are run in a balanced way, are yields down, or do people see because you've managed the soil in a certain way that yields actually don't go down, and you are perhaps more productive? Is that a fair comment?
Yeah, very fair. Some yield, nature gives us a yield of bounty from the landscape without any treatment. It will produce grass or crops. It's how we add other bits. I can get a lot higher yield, but I have to add a lot more inputs. And actually the cost of those inputs mean I've spent a lot more and I haven't actually made more margin. So my overall yield has probably come down a little bit, but my gross margin, the more I'm making more money out of growing that area of crop. And the more I work with nature, the less inputs I have to put in. So we've done a load of pollinating resources around the outside of the fields, and now we're adding them in every fourth tram line, which is 130 metres, across the middle of the field. So we have the biodiversity now in the middle of the field. And what we see is net yield gain in pollinating crops of between 5 and 20%.
That's interesting, because I remember a couple of years ago, I forget the details. Was that research originally done in a farm in Oxford where they bought the?
And there's a whole trial system. It's called the CIST trials, and a number of farms now doing it on a scientific basis on a 5-year study to understand. Nature doesn't give us it in facts and figures, and it's different each season. We're seeing many weather challenges, but they wanted to put some science behind it. But I know on my farm for my business, it's working. If public can help me delivering some of the habitat that I don't get a return from the rest of the time, because a flowering crop's only that one in 4 or 5 years. But also what we've found is we have more predators in the middle of the field and around the outside of the field. So they come and eat my slugs. They come and eat all the aphids and the bugs. But I have to be patient with them and deliver a habitat for them so they're here all year. I can't just get them to turn up. I need to make a home for them and balance it off. So for the last 6-7 years now, I haven't used insecticides on the farm because we have enough beneficials that will come and eat most of the aphids and most of the other things I don't want. So, but it's trying to learn and understand how it works. And the more I've improved my soil health by not using heavy machinery and using cover crops, actually last year when it was really wet, we got a lot more drilled than many of my neighbours who had cultivated soil because the soil was really sticky.
So explain why tilling, cultivating, turning over soil was the done thing in agriculture? Because I know from the horticultural perspective, and well, it's all the same really, it's soil, but the mycorrhizal network underneath, in the fungal mycorrhizal network in the soil, then all the bacteria that's on the nodules of legumes, etc., etc. Why was it a practice that was, why do people till it, fields? I never understood it.
I always think I go back to the horse and cart, where this farm started on. People walked behind a plough. They felt, smelt, touched the soil every day. They noticed the nature around them. And then the tractor came out, or steam engine, and then a tractor, and then the tractor had a cab. And they suddenly start disconnecting from the soil. And then the tractors have got bigger. The machinery's got bigger to do more acres in quicker time. And you become on a treadmill. And people are there selling you technology and machinery to do the latest thing.
I've got to say, I've been to the Groundsman Fair a couple of times, and I must say the tractors are pretty sexy though. They're like the cabs are just sorry, I know it's bad, but
so the tractors now are GPSed, auto everything. It's a leather chair with it heated and air cooled, so I can just sit back and enjoy the view and just turn it around on the headlands. It's a joyous place to be, particularly when it's hot weather, because the aircon's on, you set the temperature, your stereo's on, it's sweet. But actually, what's happened is we've got bigger and bigger and heavier. So what really changed my mind was, it must be nearly 10 years ago now, I was setting a student up ploughing a field, and we're turning the soil over, and I noticed when we turned the soil over, we used to run the tractor in the open slot of the furrow. So it used to run in there. But when we turned the soil over, 2 years after we last ploughed it, I could still see the tread print of the tractor tire in the bottom of the ground, which is 8 inches down. So the weight of the tractor, one has made compaction, but also driven that below. So then we were having to take this compaction out with a bigger machine going in deeper.
Yeah.
And we're on this treadmill, and it's actually been brave enough to say this has got to stop, and we've got to find another way. And many farmers are now questioning the size of the kit, the damage we're doing to soil, because if you squash the life out of it, one, it lays wet, and two, if you leave bare soil, one, it gets hot, one, all the microbes disappear and all the biology and bacteria and all the goodies, because you've got to feed them. But it's not something we've ever been taught in ag colleges and universities. It was about outputs and inputs, and putting more pesticides, fertilizers, using the latest seeds to get more output. But what we've realized is we're producing more, but it's costing us more. So actually, yields have doubled, but our returns have more than halved.
And is part of that so we were talking about the soil. Is it the lack of organic matter that's in the soil, and basically nutrients have been added by hydrocarbon-based synthetic fertilizers? Is that a big part of it?
Yeah, we've depleted the organic levels within the soil. You've got to feed bacteria. You've got to feed the worms.
Now, so to talk over, you talk about the goodies, and we're talking about the soil. The one thing that stays with me from college is we were doing our soil science lesson, and the teacher said, imagine an OXO cube size volume of soil, and he said there's more bacteria and fungus in that volume of soil than there is people on Earth. And that kind of stuck with me, that you've got all this nature above ground, but it's the invisible nature below ground.
And all what we survive on is underneath, and that soil, that feeds us, that delivers everything. We've got to go back to care for the soil, because that will deliver us future food security. If we keep depleting it and trashing it, we aren't going to be producing food in. I mean, there's some stats, there's 60 harvests left in some soils. I don't quite believe, in some places, we watch it blow away. But actually, the more we understand that soil, and the more I engage with organisations that have got that knowledge and want to share it, when we used to cultivate, you see all the seagulls eating the worms. And you think, we've got loads of worms. It's not until you understand we've got three sorts of worms. Ones that live in the top 10 centimetres, ones that live down to about 30 centimetres, 20 to 30, and the ones that go down 2 or 3 metres, the big fat juicy buggers. When we cultivated, we turned the top ones over and buried them and killed them. The middle ones got tossed about.
Yeah.
The big ones down the bottom got their holes chopped off. So we have worms, but we've got the wrong worms in the wrong place.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's when we work them, they're now my drainage channels. So if I have a concrete block and I throw a bucket of water on it and it's got no holes in it, the water runs off. That's my compacted soil. If I put roots in it and wormholes, drill some holes in the concrete block, throw the bucket of water on, it doesn't run, it drops through the block.
Yeah.
We need the holes, and that's where I need roots and worms.
And isn't worms? I was reading a bit of research a few weeks ago that worms are a great driver in other soil other microbe biodiversity, because they go through the gut lining of the worms.
Yeah.
And
so they drag down that organic matter, digest it, spew it out, and other microorganisms, other organisms live on that. But it's bringing that organic matter from the surface down, over a metre sometimes. So you're building soil, you're bringing that down, and actually that's where your good soil is. But we need to support worms. We need to feed them. The only thing they eat is most of the time is organic matter. So we need to leave a rotting piece of vegetation near the top.
So are you putting on? So it appears you're perhaps putting a sort of a green manure on the soil. But are you reapplying now organic matter like PAS 100 compost on there, or
yeah, PAS 100 compost, chicken manure, horse manure, and we tailor it and put it in different places. So we can use compost, green manures, as in our cover crops, and organic waste from livestock systems to build fertility back up in the soil. But we're also, our cover crops, we're experimenting bringing sheep in to eat the cover crop, to poo out the back end, because fertiliser out the back of an animal is far better than out of a bag. So we're starting to introduce livestock back in the system. And we hear many things about how bad livestock are for climate. Used in the right way, for the right tool, I don't want to use I want to use as little artificial fertiliser as possible. So I need to feed my soil with goodness, and that comes out the back end of an animal.
Yeah.
But I need to do it in a balanced way that's not trashing our environment, but managing my cover crops, fertilising my soil, and reducing my artificial fertiliser use.
Because that's what I was thinking. People say about, oh, they're bad for the environment, but it's the balance, isn't it? Like, yes, it produces methane and all these nasty smells, but yeah, the oil used to spread the fertilizer, all these things. I guess the damage caused by livestock is a lot less, perhaps, on balance.
I think you have to choose where your livestock comes from and what system it's in. So globally, livestock production is producing huge amounts of methane and CO2 because they're taking rainforests down to produce soya to feed animals in a feedlot, not eating grass.
Yeah.
If animals are eating grass and green matter naturally, as they should do, they're not producing that, and it's a free source that's converting green matter. You munch it off, then it grows again and capturing more carbon into a protein. And some people choose not to eat meat. That's great. But whatever people choose to eat, understand where that food product comes from and the footprint it's given. So if you import in avocados or whatever it is, understand where and how that's happening, what it's doing to the environment in those other places. So livestock globally is not great. Livestock production on a grass-based natural system is quite good for the environment and has a really good balance. And if we turn our minds back several hundred years or 1,000 years, livestock roamed the countryside, munching and trampling and doing things. We had huge numbers of bison and buffaloes and all sorts of things.
Yeah.
Numbers aren't, it's how we manage them and what role they play.
And we've seen, we could go down this rabbit hole, but we'll slightly go down this rabbit hole, but we've seen how at a farm down in Sussex at Knepp, where they, again, perhaps it's different because they've let their whole farm go over to be rewild, but the bison and the large herbivores as a driver of biodiversity has been, it's been quite pivotal, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and we've got to bring that balance back of managing the landscape in a more diverse way and understanding the key role of some livestock. But I can see, I'm a believer in less and better meat and dairy. I want to know where it comes from. Yeah. Meat that's come from a place that grazed in a nice place and lived a good life. If I want to eat meat, that's the meat I want to eat. I don't want to eat meat that's been crammed in a shed, that's flown in. And we'll come on to probably trade later, and maybe brought up in a different standard than we have in the UK. So, yeah, livestock has a role. We just need to choose how we use it. And I think going forward, using the right species of livestock in the right place for the right reason delivers environmental benefits. Yeah. Doing it wrong, you spoil it.
Yeah. So everything we're talking about now, it's dear to my heart. And, you've got the other guys in the network. Do you find that, dare I say it, so that other farmers, it becomes a bit of a religion where this is how they farm. We've always done this. We're always going to do it. I don't care what you say. I don't care. I don't care what benefits you can show at me. This is the way we do it, and it's hard to change people's minds. Or is it?
Yeah. So you've got people who are, third generation, fourth generation of doing the same, heading in the same direction. Many of them aren't doing so well in their business because they're only focusing on one output of their farm, a commodity, whether that's livestock or grains. When you look at the whole system, you can get multiple income streams and better value for the landscape you manage. But I'd also say there's people on the other side that are also equally single-minded that organic or a system is the only way we should ever farm. Yeah. I think there's a great bit in the middle. And I often put farmers into now 3 pots. You've got the third that's leading the way on some different things, and then people at NEP and rewilding and more integrated farming systems with nature and other things. You'll have the bigger pot in the middle that's done some, questioned it, or worried that the neighbours thought they were doing something a bit odd, but they're generally supportive. Yeah. And then you've got a lump the other side that it's output minded only, full inputs. Nature doesn't matter because it's just soil. I've just got to carry on. Yeah. The tough bit, I'm not worried about too much. They know we're there. They hear us. They see us. The other 2 groups we can get energy from and work with and move in a direction. But what we've found is the tough group suddenly wake up that actually those businesses are doing well, or that's a direction the public wants to support. They better change. And when they switch over, they'll go straight to the front nearly because they put so much energy into it and mindset that I've got to do it this way because this is the right way, and off they go. So I don't waste energy and time on that tough pot because it drains you of life. Work in the middle and work at the other end and move the mass, and then the others will follow because there's such a void. And I think public recognise good countryside management. They go out and enjoy good hedgerows and good landscape, and they should question how they support good farming and landscape they don't recognise as good. I just question why there are differences. Yeah,
and as you're talking, I'm thinking that perhaps over the last few months with the lockdown, that I think as a sort of general comment, but people have gone out into the countryside. They've got more I think undoubtedly people have got more reconnected back with nature, and I think perhaps some people will be able to articulate that this is a good farm or they're managing it for wildlife, and some people won't. But I think that, like you say, harrowing a field to 10 centimetres within the boundary, I think people understand now that they don't see birds, they don't see the poster child of biodiversity, bees.
Sometimes you don't just blame the farmer, it's the system they've working. So sometimes, don't bash the farmer, but try and engage and talk to them.
Because I guess that's a bit of a segue then. So you're right. I mean, it is quite easy to bash them, but you're working within a system. So I guess that we can sort of jump to the new agricultural bill, where perhaps the incentives for farmers are going to be slightly changed. It's going to be more towards the common good. Have I got that correct?
Yeah. So because we've left Europe, whatever view you have on that, our farming system and many things in the UK are going to change. And the UK is developing a different system. So instead of just paying farmers because they manage landscape, that isn't connected to food production really, it's just because they've got landscape they're managing to produce goods. They're going to come on to, certainly in England and Wales, Northern Ireland, Scotland are still developing their system more, is public money for public good. So the public will be supporting farmers delivering better air quality, water quality, environmental benefits, and all the things. As a farmer, I can't sell nature. I can't get a value to it, but it costs me money to deliver a lot of it. And some of it's really costly because to get it right costs money. Yeah. And if the public can support that and soil health management, we can have food production and food security for generations to come. And we can support farmers in some of their core costs of managing the environment for public good. So there's a directional change so that it'd be called public money for public good. This government has guaranteed the same budget as previous at the moment, this term of government. Farming works in a bit more long-term planning, and we really want to secure some more, not necessarily money, but just fixed, 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the line. I plan my business up to 10 years in front of me, and I need security of knowing whichever way the politician wants me to farm, just let me know in enough time to change my business rather than break me. So we're going to move to that. It's going to be very challenging for some farmers because it's a different concept, but we support it with some caveats within it. So the bill you'd have probably heard that went through went into Westminster, went into Parliament, and had its reading there. There's a number of amendments different MPs tried to put in about food standards and trade and other bits. Unfortunately, none of that got added. So now it's gone to the House of Lords, and lots of us are engaging with peers to sort of put those good amendments in, hopefully, and hopefully get a government to back it. We hear so much around food standards and about chlorinated chicken and hormone beef. For me and many others, it's not about the chlorine or the hormones. It's about what food standard we want everybody to eat in the UK. And it doesn't matter if we grow it here in the UK or it's imported, it surely should have a bit minimum health standard and dietary content.
You'd think, wouldn't you? Because we're putting it in our bloody bodies. It's
really
just like
we currently import many products that are illegal to produce in the UK. We're bringing in oilseed rape that's had neonicotinoid, which is a bee harming insecticide, because we can't produce it here. They're importing it. And it's like pretty bonkers that the UK farmers are held up the ladder and we've got to produce here, but we turned a blind eye to chickens that come in that are still caged reared or intensely, because it's cheap product. And that's where our trade problems will come, because the UK production will be told to be at a standard, but we'll let it a bit, we'll let it come in if it's got a different standard because it's cheap and the consumer can choose. When you're buying in a supermarket or a shop with a label on, you can choose because there's something to recognise. But 60% before this COVID, we were eating out. Now the balance has changed. Most of our food is in sandwiches, fast food, restaurants, whatever. We don't know the quality of that food. And that's where lots of this poorer standard stuff was slipping in. We're working hard to try and get the government to recognise that all food in the UK should be of the same minimum standard. So it's not about driving down for the cheapest thing, forget about animal welfare, environmental damage elsewhere in the world. We want a base. Let's be honest of where we want to produce. We hear some politicians say, well, it's about cheap food because we've got to feed the poor people of society. Actually, if we produce cheap food, but we're trashing our environment, that's not going to be cheap food for long. No. And surely, for me, we have a percentage of the population who can't afford good quality food. They're eating a poor quality diet. They struggle to even eat sometimes. But what we find is the health service has to pay for that cost later in the time because they're unfit, they're unhealthy, the dietary is terrible. So the health service picks up. In a more joined up approach, surely society can support those lesser fortunate people to eat a better diet and supplying it in a way that everyone has healthier food,
Mm.
then our future costs of the NHS will come down. And it's trying to get that through to the politicians and the policymakers to say, let's have this long-term vision of what we want, and let's have food standard as a core of our society. Because if we're healthy on the inside, we're healthy on the outside.
So then at the moment, I mean, that makes total sense. So at the moment, are you lobbying, or you're speaking to the people in the Lords? Are you getting blank looks? Are you getting pats on the back and we hear you and all this stuff? Or how's it going?
Same as all groups. There's some that are really welcoming and really want to engage. Others question it because it's different to what they've heard before. And that's where we need to get in and meet them and give them the briefing papers and the policy documents. But it's really hard at the moment because we can't go and meet them. We have to do it on a Zoom or on a phone call or something, or a bit of paper. And sometimes I like to see people's faces so you can see if they're understanding you, and then you can direct your language to something they can understand.
Yeah.
It speeds the process up a lot. But yeah, we're heavily engaged with them. We're getting some really good traction. But the House of Lords may put some really good amendments in, and it may go back to Westminster into the MPs. And with a strong government, they may choose not to adopt them and kick them out again. So that's where, when it gets to come across the other side of the House, we need the public to really push hard for their MPs to back this safe food and environmental standards for our future landscape and our food production. As a network, we having a growing membership of public, so we can go and activate them to say, here's a link, here's how to get hold of your MP, tell them how you feel and what you think.
And I guess you're not alone in sort of going speaking to the Lords, speaking to these, because from what I gather, the wildlife trusts are sort of really lobbying. They're really
every organisation is out there lobbying at the moment.
Yeah.
Anything that wants to have any connection with nature, climate, food, farming, so that the poor peers are having it coming from left, right, and centre. And it's about building coalitions and finding people you can work with as organisations to make a single approach, but also pick off the ones that work with you and then try and brief the ones that don't, and sort of, let's be sensible about it, but how do we work without bombarding them? And there's many different views out there from each side of the camp. So it's about, for us, working with like-minded farmers, organisations, public, peers, MPs, and let's build momentum to sort of say that this is really what society would want and what public have a passion about.
So again, we're talking earlier about, we touched on it briefly, about climate change. So how do you see, because perhaps for some people, these are perhaps different issues, unrelated, but for people out there, how are climate change, food production, ecological restoration, how do you see that they're linked?
The only way we're going to tackle the climate emergency we have is through nature-based solutions and stopping using carbon-emitting practices. As farmers manage 70% of the UK, we can deliver a lot of those climate capture solutions, trees, cover crops, changing farming practices. So if we're going to plant trees, they need to be in the right place for the right reason.
Yeah.
They can also tackle flood mitigation and slow the flow of water. We see more extremes of weather, so we can have them in the right places. So they tick multiple boxes, but we're also near people. Why can't we have fruit and nut trees? If we're going to eat less meat and change our diet over the next sort of 20 years, start growing the crops that people can come out and pick and come and engage and feed the people nearer and connect people with their food and the landscape.
So you touched on that briefly. So you talked about this, there's a massive emphasis on tree planting, and it's because trees, again, poster child, plant a tree, capture carbon, but it's not the silver bullet, is it? It should be part of a mix, but
it's got to be done the right tree in the right place for the right reason to deliver the right benefit. In some places, you can do a block of single species stuff and then harvest it and use it in building material. But much of it, we need to think about the wildlife that there, the wildflower meadows, don't go and plant on them, because the pollinating resource is the most important thing in that area. And we've got to be careful what we do. So everyone gets hung up on the simple solutions and the language of trees. they have a really important role, but they're one piece of the jigsaw puzzle. So as an arable farmer, by not cultivating, reducing my diesel use, I've cut my diesel use by 60%. So we saved 77,000 litres of fuel last season compared to how we farmed 5 years before.
So that again, bloody hell.
Yeah, 77,000 litres of fuel we saved compared with how we farmed just over 5 years ago. If we farmed that way now, my business would have used that much more fuel.
Bloody hell.
And we're not a very big business. Yeah. So you multiply it up, but also by having those cover crops, having green matter constantly growing as long as possible in the ground, we're capturing more carbon, trying in organic matter, putting it into the soil. Healthier soil captures more carbon, but also because it has a healthier soil, when it does rain really hard, it captures it like a sponge and won't let it go so quick and holds it for when it's drier, like we see currently, from really wet winter to really, really dry, to really wet, to really hot and dry. My crops are managing to survive better. So we need to find all the different solutions, but we also, public have got to change how they live. Less wasteful. Over 40% of the food we produce gets chucked away. It's bonkers. Many of the supermarkets do 2-for-1 offers. People buy it and forget it's in the fridge and then toss it in the green bin. And it's like, so I'm buying in compost, green waste compost from South Cambridge or from Cambridgeshire, of that food waste and green and your garden clippings. But we've had to stop using a lot of it because people forget to take the packaging off the food when they chuck it in the bin. So we're putting plastic back on our fields where we're trying to grow the food from. But we've all, not just farmers, everybody in society has got to make positive direction changes. And if you just do one thing a day, that's got to be good. And what we have seen through this current crisis the last few months, the planes have stopped, the traffic's stopped, people are walking and biking, and actually the air's got cleaner. We hear the wildlife more. And yes, people have got to move, but can the jobs move to the people? Can you sit at home and do some work 2 or 3 days a week rather than just travelling to the far-flung parts of the UK to go and sit in an office? So we all can do different things, and it's going to be very challenging the next 10 to 20 years if we're going to get to net zero. This isn't a walk in the park, and this isn't just I'll do some recycling, or I'll buy some organic goods, or I won't change my car quite so often, and I won't buy so many clothes, and I might buy some food that's locally produced. It's all of those things and a lot more. And farmers, we can deliver lots of those solutions. We can produce food for local markets, but we need the public to support the production systems that become more local. So if there's a local farmers market, a farm shop, or an online system, try and support it. We have seen in the last 3 months, huge numbers of people suddenly couldn't buy food in the supermarket and there's mass panic. We didn't have a food problem, we had a supply chain problem. We saw farmers chucking it away because they couldn't get it to someone to eat it, which is bonkers. We need to connect people with the food and shorten those journeys up. And I had a lorry driver last autumn come to fetch a lorry load of wheat from me. He'd come down from Scotland with some barley, tipped it somewhere local to be malted. It was going somewhere else. Then it was going to go back to Scotland to be bottled up. 800 miles that barley would have done before it's even been processed properly. Some of this is bonkers. We've got livestock travelling up and down the country because they've shut all the local abattoirs.
Yeah, I heard that.
And it's just, we've got a whole system we need to rebuild, but we've got to tell the public how they can support the farmers and the food producers in producing it better, more sustainably, better welfare for animals, shorter chains.
So how do we get that message across? Because as you're talking, again, I'm thinking of perhaps another religion of the big supermarkets, the big five, and perhaps in my ignorance, they have a monopoly on who they buy for, what they buy, or what price, etc., etc. So how do we get that message across that we need to reduce those supply chains, we need to buy local? How do we get that across? I mean, it's
so you can have a look on our website, nffn.org.uk, and we've got some links to some websites where you can buy local and seasonal, and farm shops and bits. Excellent. We've got to take a bit of responsibility on some of those products. How do we go and get it? Cambridge, you've got the farmers markets across Cambridgeshire. You've got farm shops. You've got direct selling produce. But those things we can't buy. Yes, use your supermarket, but also think about where it's come from. And we will see the supermarkets change their model a little bit, but every time you go and buy food, you can make a difference in taking small steps in the purchasing.
Yeah. So I zoned out there for a second because as you were talking, a few podcasts ago, I interviewed somebody from the Cambridge Fruit Company, and I don't know if you've heard of him, but again, he supplies local fruit and veg to people's doors, and so I guess it's getting that link up, isn't it? It's the farmers markets, it's the people, the sort of the farming sector, the sort of the commercial sector, and
we've got to grow those markets. And some people say, "Oh, that's more expensive buying it from there," but quite often it's not. Quite often it's actually cheaper, and actually the farmer gets a bit more out of it, so he doesn't need to sell it so much because that middleman's gone.
Yeah.
We've got to be a bit more joined up, and the more people can connect with where their food comes from, they'll understand our climate issue and nature issue because they connect with the landscape. It's whatever it's producing.
As you're saying that, I mean, again, perhaps it's an educational thing as well, because perhaps kids in schools, perhaps they don't have a concept, where their food comes from. A lot of the
children haven't been taught how to cook and prepare meals properly. No. It's out of a packet or a bag or a tin or something, and actually you can produce a lot of good food as quick as you can microwave a dish, but it's being prepared and thinking about it. And I think a lot of people in the last few months have really connected back with growing food, but also making their own dinners and producing things from raw materials, and that home cooking and baking and bits and pieces.
And making their own compost as well. There was a fact that on the RHS website, there was like 75,000 more visits per month on the how to compost page, because everybody's green bin wasn't being taken away. So
but we have many housing developers now with no gardens, or they have a postage stamp of green grass or astroturf or a bit of patio decking or something. So how can we help people grow food? So we need more allotments and community production systems. I mean, we know one or two farmers now are actually donating bits of land near to a village or something, and the community are working together to produce some food.
Now, can I interject? Because because there's obviously the agricultural bills going through, but there is the biodiversity net gain that has to be undertaken by developers. Is there any? I don't know how much you know about that, but is there any sort of crossover where developers can perhaps be using their biodiversity net gain on farmland, or how does that work?
They desperately need to have a more joined up and connected approach. A lot of the net gain is on site or a little bit offset. If you've got a development, it should be across the landscape, the benefit, not just in this little 10 acre, 100 acre plot. It should be connecting. And then we can connect, more allotments, bigger space for those people who want a bigger garden, or a production area that's nearby that they can do it as a community. Lots of people, there's one or two, the Big Barn website, they've got some links on there that if you're a gardener and you've got some excess produce, or a school producing some bits in your school, trade it. If you've got some extra carrots, who wants them and who can give you something else? And it's because most people grow things, you have a glut. All of a sudden, it's all there. But how do we work with others to say, I've got some spare of this, and that's where a lot of the allotment system was always great, because everyone shared it within the allotments of who's got a bit of extra or who's got a bag of seed or some spare plants. But we need to really connect this net gain in, not just on the site development, but across landscape and for neighbouring communities.
And that's something that Tony Juniper talks a lot about. It's having quite literally that joined up areas of habitat. So it is quite literally joined up across the landscape. So there can be, correct me if I'm wrong, migration and
There is no point having nature reserves or high value farms as a pot, because species get to a level and they've got to move on. But if they can't go anywhere, they're buggered. So what the vision's got to be is this interconnecting landscape using waterways and hedges as wildlife corridors. And some will be really big and wide. we can have rewilded areas and wilder landscapes and connect productive landscapes with nature corridors together. And it's got to be done, because we'll bug ourselves up if not, because we won't be able to have nature to help us produce the food. And yes, we can produce it in labs or indoors in tower systems, but actually...
But that will never, but that will, I mean, yeah, this, again, it's a silver bullet, isn't it? You see, oh, you know, the hydroponic system, you know, you could be growing lettuce in a, but that's...
It will feed a niche market for a certain produce, but actually fresh fruit and veg that's fresh out of the ground or picked off a bush tastes so much different than something that's been in cold storage for 6 months, then gas to be put on a shelf to be eaten within 6 days. And that's where we've got to go back and enjoy when it's in season. Be a glutton, fill yourself up with it, but then decide strawberries is now out of season, I'm on root vegetables and other things.
Then it comes back perhaps full circle that it is getting out that religion, isn't it? The religion of every produce, every time of the year, on tap, you know, fresh strawberries mid-December, you know.
Which don't really got any flavour, but they look pretty because they're red. So actually enjoy when they're there and they're good, and choose not to when, you know, have a decoration now and again. It's not about not, but just less. Yeah.
What do they do to those strawberries to get them red? Because I've come on, I've stuffed my, you know, you impulse buy, you put it in the, you buy it, but they're nice and red, but they've got no flavour. What sort of chemical are they putting in them, or are they?
I think sometimes it's a production system that's very few nutrients within the soil, and it's just growth. So they use the sunlight. A lot of it's done in Spain and other places. Some produce, they chemically treat them with gases. They put them in a sealed container and force ripen them. So when they get to you, they're just about ready. And actually, that's not the kind of food we really want to be eating.
Because I guess from
with health issues, and you do wonder.
Yeah.
So much going on. What do we really know about our food we put inside us?
And I guess there's the one, it's not good for the environment that we, you know, have stuff out of season, but from a sort of a personal point, or from a body point of view, isn't the lack of nutrients and the lack of actual nutrition per weight of, you know, of fruit and veg, it's gone down and down and down, hasn't it?
Yeah, we're eating more of worse stuff, having less of the micronutrients and the balanced diet, eating more fats, sugars, and the things the body shouldn't really be consuming. There's free market and free trade and all that, but actually there's got to be a point when society's picking up that bill for a fatter society. You know, our joints are wearing out, we have health issues later in life.
Yeah.
Whose fault is that? Is that society's, or is it personal? And for me, it's how do we steady the ship to sort of make some responsibility back on people to try and stay fit and healthy and eat well.
So we talked earlier about how indirectly, you know, we can help farmers by buying local, but from a sort of an individual's point of view, how can they support you and your organisation? What can they do?
Visit our website, Nature Friendly Farming. Just Google it; it will pop up. Sign up for free. When you sign up, you'll be asked to sign up to a manifesto, which is just some key line points, sort of our direction of what we want to do. And it's free for farmers to join, organisations and members of the public, because by having more numbers behind us, we can have more clout when we go meet MPs and bits, because we represent a bigger mass of society.
Yeah.
Also, when we have things we want to engage people with, we don't bombard people with emails, but we do for public every couple of months. We do a newsletter just about what farming's going through and how you can support local farming, or how you might want to support engagement with a politician at odd times. So yeah, but come and join, come and be part of it, and give suggestions of, you know, feedback of what else you'd like to see.
Because I guess as you're saying that, you're giving feedback, perhaps I guess there's this cross-pollination as well. So perhaps an organisation like, I don't know, Wildlife Trust or a soil association or something like that, then they can give their specialised input. Do you get a lot of that collaboration?
Yeah, the network is a group of farmers with farm knowledge and public and organisation. We haven't got the detailed knowledge of doing some things. We've got many organisations that support us that if you want to know more about otters, bees, carrots, we can point you in the direction of people with really good information. If you want to do something, the network's there to facilitate that knowledge share and sort of where can we go to get help, or I don't understand something, or I want to do something different. There is lots of really good information out there with some really amazing organisations, whether they're a farming group, a wildlife group. And for me, lots of the conservation groups, I haven't got to believe in everything they're doing. We've got to find things that we can engage with and move forward, and park the things I disagree with them with. But by having those conversations, they can actually learn a little bit about what farmers are thinking and feeling on the ground, to what their policy or their drive is, and we can understand where they're going. And what we've found over the last 2 years, there's an awful lot of overlap, but we just have different language, but we're trying to go in a similar direction. By having that bit more conversation and sort of support each other on the bits we can, there's a bit more trust built up, and we're losing that us and them, and trying to have a positive direction forward. So the more we grow, the better we can be. Because
it's so interesting, as you're talking, the phrase I use, or I sprung to mind, was getting people are in their silos, aren't they? They're in their silos with their speciality, and it is that joined up approach. Because I was at a conference a couple of years ago where it was about green infrastructure, so how to bring nature back into city centres, but again, it was just all these specialist engineers over here, the ecologists over there, the landscape architects over here, and it was such an but again, they're all using their different language.
That's it. That's the whole thing. Each policy, each silo uses language that they feel happy with, and it buzzes them. But it has the opposite effect to some others, or they interpret a different way. By actually sitting down sometimes and sound checking and ground truth in some of what they're going to do, it actually, if they do a press article, it actually hits softer to farmers instead of alienates them. And the same with farmers trying to say some of the conservation stuff is not easy to deliver and we've got problems with it. We can word it in ways that doesn't build a brick wall and start lobbing missiles at each other. It's, let's discuss this. We can agree with 60, 100, 80%. These bits are the knots. So let's park that. We agree with that. Let's put this over here. Can we have a discussion on it and just sort of which bits can we decide on, and which bits have we got to learn best practice from in future years?
And from afar, that's what I see. Perhaps in a similar vein, that's what I see Tony Juniper doing very well.
I've got a lot of time for him. I've met him. He's been out to the farm, and we've had a lot of people come out to the farm. And the best thing to show people is get them on the farm, get them walking around, and see what we're doing. We can talk about the problems and the benefits and how we see a better future, and how I can point to many other farmers that are doing a similar thing, and how do we make that happen. And we need people to go into organisations to join things together. It's not this, the Nature Friendly Farming Network isn't the bee's knees and it's the only thing that should go on. It's this collective of different organic, conventional, different people with a similar direction. And then we can work with others. So nobody's got the silver bullet, but they've got some really good stuff. So stop being, I am the best organisation and what I say goes, to, I've got some good stuff. I challenge you because I don't agree with what you're doing, but we want to have a conversation, not an argument.
And let's learn from each other. Is that sort of, that's so, that's not refreshing. That's so lovely to hear, because again, we can all be pragmatic, and I could cite examples from the horticultural industry being, now this is the way, this is this answer, blah, blah, blah.
Social media is feeding this us and them sometimes. As much as, Twitter's really good, but you get a whole load of people pile in and give you abuse sometimes when you're trying to find solutions and discuss something, and Instagram and Facebook are similar. People have got to stop and think what they write and what they read. And are they adding something to the discussion, or are they just being bloody minded and firing in a comment? And we see too often now within society, people want to have the argument and fire a point in, not find a solution.
I don't want to
Unless
listen. I
work
don't want to
on
listen.
we're all buggered.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm very much in the mindset of how do we bring people and communities together? How do we try and understand different things? And how do we have a positive way of affecting my landscape I manage, but my neighbours as well? I can connect with people. And how do we get our communities going forward in a good direction?
Mm.
And there's a lot of people out doing similar things. Let's get going.
And I do feel that, you know, with the agriculture bill coming through, for all its rights and wrongs, for our new sort of newer connection with nature, or revitalized connection with nature after COVID, it's not once in a lifetime, but it is.
It's a moment in time that we must grasp.
Yeah.
So many things have come together that actually this next 5 years, for our environmental bill, the agriculture bill, our trade bill, if we can get them set sound and in a good direction, so many good things will follow.
Yeah.
If we don't, we're going to be in a mess and trouble for the next 20, 30 years. The last time we had an agriculture bill was 60, 70 years ago.
Wow.
It doesn't come around very often. We need to have a really sound framework to build our house and our future together.
I didn't realise that the last agricultural bill was 70 years ago.
Yeah. Post-war, there was the last major change. We had some smaller adaptations, but then we went into the EU. We followed their bits, so we became a smaller voice within a bigger group. We have and actually, lots of the world are watching UK develop their policy, and we've seen the European policy change more to public money for public goods. We're seeing other countries care about their environment and move their farming system, their industrial system into a more nature-friendly system. So let's lead the world. For me, it's about how do we lead the world in demonstrating the best way we can use our landscape, produce food, take care of other countries in positive trade terms, and engage in a good way.
Because that's a really lovely way to put it. Let's be the sort of the steer. Let's be the poster child for a considerate agricultural policy. And
we've got COP26. We were going to be hosting this autumn. Will be next November. The UK has a huge opportunity of setting the framework in the next 12 months in the UK.
Yeah.
And then encouraging others to pick it up while we host COP. There is such a moment in time to really make this happen. It needs doing it at pace and deliver at pace, but bring enough people together to get the momentum going. And
for whatever people perhaps feel about their methods, and we could argue the toss, Extinction Rebellion for bringing the sort of the crisis to a fore. Again, we can talk about the methods and all the rest of it, but it has brought it to the fore for a lot of people, hasn't it?
And same as any organisation, you had those that are very, very passionate, very extreme, and did some things that we'd all question. But as a movement, they made things happen. And I actually went down when they protested in London and gave a talk in one of the parks about farming and nature-friendly farming. Yeah. And it was so engaging, and so many people wanted to come and talk. And I spent time walking around talking to people. And there's Extinction Rebellion farmers now, a group that were there. And many of us want similar goals. We just use different language again. And Extinction Rebellion may be a bit more militant and a bit more challenging to our normal, what we accept. And there are a percentage of those that do things that we probably wouldn't agree with. Yeah. But that's life in all camps and in all groups. So while we get upset with them sometimes, we can understand why they do it.
Dare I say it, that seems like a really organic way to finish the podcast. Mine. So do you want to tell everybody where they can find you, sort of websites, Instagram, LinkedIn, where can they get more information?
So if you're looking for me on Twitter and that, it's Lines Martin. If you're want to know a bit more about my farm, you can find us on Instagram and Facebook, Papley Grove Farm. And if you're interested in the network, that's on Twitter, Instagram, just search Nature Friendly Farming or NNF UK. It's even a mouthful for me, and I've been saying it for the last few years. Just Google search us, we'll pop up, and if there's groups that want to come around or look around farms, I'm happy to host where I can, or I can point you in other directions of other farms who could do similar.
Fantastic. So can you just say your farm name again? Because when you said it, the audio cut out. So do you mind saying it again?
Yeah, so my farm is Papley Grove Farm, and that's on Facebook and Instagram. And then you'll find us on Twitter and the network, or as me as an individual.
And did I hear correctly that you don't mind showing people around the farm?
No, I really welcome that kind of thing. Sometimes I'm busy, I can't, but if there's small groups and WIs and schools, if we can help, that's great. But also, if they're not near me, I might be able to support them finding another farm near them. So we've got to, as farmers, we hear so often, get off my land.
Yeah.
The arguments. Through this last 3 months, we've seen lots of people coming onto farmland and going places they weren't really meant to go, not on footpaths. We should be engaging with them and explaining what we're doing in a positive way. But what I do really care, the one thing I will say right at the last, if you come into the countryside, take care of it. Leave only footprints and memories. Don't bring rubbish. Over the summer, do not have bonfires or barbecues or anything else.
Yeah.
Because we've all got to live around here. And if you chuck it out your car somewhere, somebody else is having to pick it up, or some wildlife is getting destroyed by it. And it's really sad to see. I see many instances of animals eating balloons and wrapped up in plastic and horrible things, and you just think, why?
But people, when the message gets out there, people will learn. I mean, people will learn to respect the country, but it's
slow education. And many people had more connection with the countryside. There was the countryside code, take your rubbish home, shut the gates if it's shut when you get there. And it's just, the countryside's a working environment for many farmers. And you've just got to remember, it's a busy place, and people do things, grow crops and have livestock. Just take care of it.
Cool, Martin. Thanks for that. Top man.
Right, thank you ever so much.
Lovely chatting.